two kind of scenarios, like system with active malware or system with dormant malware. So what I mean is that, let's say antivirus detected a malware in the system. So that's where, let's say, let's say it will give an alert. For example, it didn't terminated the malware, but it gave it an alert. Okay. So in that case, it will be the first scenario that you will be handling, or maybe the second scenario. Okay, the system with dormant malware. So that, let's say the malware was terminated by the antivirus and it was quarantined. So in that case, you will be kind of getting system with dormant malware. Okay. These are two scenarios that you can handle with this kind of tools. Okay. Now what I will tell you is that, let's say you have the IOCs. Okay. IOCs, I means, let's say the IP address of the C2 server, or let's say, or various new things. Let's say what files gets created, files creation, for example. So I wanted to know, using these IOCs, let's say, what all kind of scenarios you can kind of handle. Will it be only the first kind of scenarios, or this only the second kind of scenarios, or let's say all three of them? What would be your take on that? Any guess? So I hope I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Okay. So if you, yeah, you go on.
Sir, could you please repeat that question, sir?
Yeah. So what I mean is that,
Uh,
let's say you have the IOCs, okay, and IOC, I mean, let's say you have the IP address of the malware, or let's say the file. You have IOC, like, okay, these are the files, like let's say abc.exe dot get created in the system. These are the kind of IOC you have. So I wanted to know, like, what kind of incidents you can handle if you have this kind of IOCs. Like, will you be able to handle all these three type of incidents with this IOC, or maybe, let's say, only the first kind of scenarios? So what I will do is that, like, if there's a confusion, I'll give one more example. Okay. So if you have, let's say, IOCs with you, you can actually deal with all the three kind of scenarios. Okay. So let's say that there is a malware, active malware in the system. So maybe the IOC, let's say the IP address, for an example, the malware is trying to reach out to an C2 URL. So in that case, maybe that IC will be helpful in kind of dealing with the first kind of scenarios, which is system with active malware. It may also be helpful in kind of dealing with the system with dormant malware, definitely, because there will be, let's say, the file created. You have the IOC that, okay, if there is any kind of system which has, let's say, abc.exe, that means it was potentially compromised. So in that case, you will be able to, with the help of IOC, you will be able to kind of deal with this kind of scenarios too, which is the second number, system with dormant malware. And also the third part, let's say, and the third part I mean is that, let's say, there are various kind of like Microsoft tools by which you can actually, by which you, like, malware author can actually achieve their goals. So let's say for an example, kind of like, let's say there was a scheduled task, for an example, in the system, and that scheduled task is, let's say, has been configured to kind of download the exe file from the internet and execute it. So in that case, maybe the IOC will also be able to tell you that, okay, if there are, like, did any system communicate with the IP addresses of the malware, or let's say malicious file is there. So even if those connections to that IP address or that file was created by the official and Microsoft tools, you will be kind of able to detect that. So IOCs will be able to help you in all these three scenarios, to deal with all these three scenarios. So that is what I mean. I hope I'm kind of a little bit clear. Okay. So now the thing is that, let's say you have an information about the malware behavior. Okay, so that you know that okay, there. So like let's say you have a malware sample and you know like how this malware behave. Okay, so so now can you tell me like what kind of scenarios um, you can kind of handle with that information? Let's say you know that okay, you have malware and you know like how it behaves, like what all things it does on the system. So any guess like what kind of scenarios you can handle uh, using that information? Can you handle? So let's ask that question in a different way. Can you handle this third scenario? And any guess on that?
Uh,
Yeah, pardon?
so like um, so we can first of all we'll isolate the system, right? The malicious system.
No, that's correct. But what I mean is that let's say you are dealing with you have three different kind of scenarios. What I mean is that scenarios means that you'll be kind of encountering different kind of incidents, but let's say of a malware. And thing is that let's say one of the incident is that where you're dealing with a system of a Windows system which has some kind of malware in it. Okay, and repeat it again. And then you have a system where let's say the malware is not running right now, but it is still there in the system. Okay, so let's say you are handling any incident where you found out again you're doing some kind of investigation of a disk or network, and you found out okay there is a system, there's a laptop which has let's say there is a malware that is still running on that host. So this is what I mean uh, by the scenario that you might encounter in your SOC career. Okay. So I think there's a little bit confused. I will try to address it by myself. So let's say kind of like you have a sample of a malware and you know how it behaves. Okay. So what I mean to know is that using that information, what kind of scenarios let's say you will encounter or like that you'll be able to kind of handle those kind of scenarios. So what I mean is that if you have a malware and you know how it behaves, so that means if you're dealing with a scenario like system with active malware, okay, so you know that okay, if you're dealing with an incident that has a system which is compromised and it has an active malware, so what you can do is that you can actually kind of like let's say it is the same malware, so you can kind of quickly investigate that. Maybe you can quickly investigate or let's say contain the system and all. So you can deal with this kind of scenarios in a very easy way. So if you encounter this kind of scenarios, this kind of incident, you can handle that if you know that okay how the malware behaves and all. Okay, the same malware behaves. Similarly, even if that incident that you are handling, okay, if it has that same malware which you know that okay, how it behaves, you can again handle that kind of incidents. Okay, because you know that okay that malware, even though it is not executing, you will know that okay what all files that malware would have created or what all IP address that malware would have communicated to. Okay, so you'll be able to handle this kind of incident too if you know the behavior of how that malware works. Okay, but it won't fit in this kind of scenarios because this scenarios actually there is no malware in let's say there is no malware currently in that host. Okay, but even though kind of it is compromised because using the official Microsoft tool itself, the malware author was able to kind of let's say compromise the system. Okay, so 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 for an example what I mean to say is that for an example. So for an example, what I mean to say is that let's say this 172.16.66.36 is a system, okay, where the malware author was trying to create this file psexesvc.exe. So now this is actually a Microsoft sign tool, okay. This is not a malware, okay. This is a Microsoft sign tool that actually allows you to kind of execute any kind of let's say software with system level privilege. Okay, so the thing is that just having this tool, so you will find out like, okay, let's say